We're talking now with Dr. Amy Hagerman, our OSU Extension Ag Policy Specialist. And Amy, as we kind of reflect back on the year that was, quite a lot happened this year in terms of news cycle, but in terms of policy, not so much.
Yeah, we definitely had a lot happening in terms of using policy in Oklahoma because we had a very disaster intensive year here in the state. But in terms of new policy development, not a lot happened in this year. We came into it with high hopes of having a farm bill in this year, and actually there were some really good signs that that would happen in May with the markup of the Farm, Food, and National Security Act in the House Ag Committee. But then as we got closer to the election, really the focus just shifted over onto the election for many of our congressional members, and then all eyes were, of course, on the presidential election, and that slowed down the whole process.
I know we're really waiting to see kind of how things shape up with the new administration, but in terms of the election, those months when there was a lot of discussion between the candidates, really vastly different approaches to ag policy.
Yeah, very different priorities in terms of how they would address the challenges that we're facing here in agriculture. Challenges like inflation, labor shortages, international trade, market price dynamics. These are all the things that were part of the discussion when it came to agriculture. And not just for our presidential candidates, but also for our various congressional members that were running for re-election across the country, in how that would shape our agriculture committees going forward into 2025.
As we wind down the year and look ahead, at some things that we can start talking about for next year, there's some framework in place already that may influence the next iteration of the Farm Bill?
Yes, absolutely. So with the leadership in the House Ag Committee remaining pretty consistent, but then having a turnover into Republican leadership and Senator Bozeman taking over in the Ag Committee on the Senate side of things, we can expect that to be a pretty solid framework because Senator Bozeman was quite supportive of the House bill that passed. And so we can kind of look at that and say, okay, this is what we might expect from a farm bill going forward. So increasing reference prices to reflect higher costs of production, lifting up that safety net to reflect what producers are really needing to cover on their operations, looking at maybe some expansions in crop insurance and the area coverage options under crop insurance. Also, some of the other provisions around conservation, making sure that we have adequate conservation dollars to address some of the conservation challenges that have resulted from some of these big natural disasters that we've experienced in the last year. These will probably all be conversation points that I would expect to form the framework of whatever our farm bill looks like in the next year.
Is there any way to think about what a possible timeline will be? Obviously, there's a lot to discuss, and I know you'll be keeping a close eye on it, updating us along the way. But
yeah,
can you? I hate to use the word speculate, but can you kind of predict how that might roll out?
I think it'll be in the new Congress. I think at this point, probably there are a number of things that need to be addressed in this lame duck Congress that the Farm Bill is going to get probably pushed. So I'm anticipating an extension throughout till September 30th of 2025, and that timeline will somehow lead up to that September 30th deadline. But the pressure is on in terms of a need for a new Farm Bill, updates. The world is much different than it was in 2018 when the last Farm Bill was put into place. So I am anticipating that the pressure is there from agriculture groups, from our state secretaries of agriculture as well. They have all emphasized the need for a new Farm Bill in 2025. So I do expect to see something happening prior to that September 30th deadline for whatever extension is passed on the Farm Bill.
In addition to the Farm Bill, there's some other possibilities in terms of policy that have been stated that are coming, or at least will be debated and discussed, that could impact agriculture.
Yeah, there are some key provisions in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that will need to be reviewed again in 2025. They would expire in 2025. And so I expect there to be some discussion around taxation. I also expect there to be some discussion around trade. You know, we're all watching this potential for tariff situation very, very closely, the impacts that could have on agriculture, and especially the potential for retaliatory tariffs as well in the coming year. You know, also the debt ceiling is being discussed in 2025. It's going to be a very busy policy year.
And so you will need to come on SUNUP a lot, it sounds like, and keep us all informed and obviously be a resource for folks in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I look forward to the discussions.
All right, Amy, thanks a lot. Thanks for all you do for SUNUP throughout the year, and Happy New Year to you and your family.
Thank you.